Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode review for Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 5. This one is titled The Bells. And we are once again back thrust into this world and into this war. And what is very interesting about this episode is if you thought the last episode was controversial when it came to the internet reacting to it, you've seen nothing until you've seen this one, because it's probably even more controversial than the one from last week. Yes, this episode, man, there's just a lot happening in it, and it's so immersive, and there's so much to dive into. So let's start off at the very beginning. We are kind of in the aftermath of what happened last week with the death of both Missandei and one of Daenerys' dragons, and she is definitely mentally reeling from this. And this is kind of her episode where I believe she finally mentally breaks. It's the episode that we just see her full wrath on display. But before we get to that, let's look at the very beginning of this episode where John comes now here to the front of the army. His army is making their way down, but I guess he took an extra route around the water to get there sooner than everyone else, and he is greeted there and he is greeted there, and he goes and sees Daenerys first, and I believe he is. This is when I believe he has a conversation with Varys. I can't remember if it's after or before he meets with Danny, but basically the conversation he has is that Varys basically tells him he knows about Jon's true lineage, and he says you would be a better king than she would be a queen, because I've seen many kings, and you would be one who is better, one who is kind and just and all those things. I mean, you can take from that what you will. I mean, I don't think Jon is quite capable of being the king right now. I don't think he's quite capable of being that much of a leader right now, because he's so reluctant to do it. Let me just put that there. He's so reluctant to do it to the point where I don't believe he wants to do it. He literally says he doesn't want to do it. Let me move that there and make a whole bunch of noise. Let me get back to what I was saying. He doesn't want to do it. Says he doesn't want to do it. He meets with Daenerys, who is definitely not in the right frame of mind. She is, like I said, reeling, and they they are their relationship has gone through a very interesting track here. I think once they found out how they were related and what they meant to each other and what they, how connected they are, their relationship kind of has gone down. Jon has stayed steadfast to loyalty and steadfast to loving her, but he doesn't quite love her in the way that she loves him, which is still a very interesting thing to me, because she is continuously making romantic overlutes towards him, and he is definitely fighting them. He's not giving over to them fully. He's giving over to them somewhat, but he is very much reluctant in the end. And it happens once again in this episode. There's another thing that happens in this episode when it comes to this kind of inner gang of people. Varys dies in this episode. He finally meets his end, and a lot of people aren't big fans of that. And I can understand why. Some of the characterization writing in this season, specifically in its second half, right now, the last couple of episodes, or really the last two episodes, including this one, has been odd. It's not odd, but it's been very fast. Like, I understand that this was the end that they wanted to get to with some of these characters. This is the road they wanted to get to with some of these characters, but they just don't have the time to organically grow them or get them to that point. They're just kind of thrusting them in that direction and hoping they land. And some of them do, some of them don't. But the one with Varys bothers me because Varys is a really smart person. He's a survivor. He has survived many kings and many monarchs in Westeros to be, a powerful figure. He has had spies throughout Westeros and Essos. He's done all kinds of things from the shadows, from the background, doing things, very secretive. And he ends up slipping up by telling Tyrion about where his current allegiances are lying, and that is with Jon. He pretty much told him last episode, and Tyrion decides because of his loyalty to Daenerys, he is going to tell Daenerys about this treasonous thought, about this treasonous act, and Varys ends up getting killed because of it. And Tyrion, man, for somebody who is one of the smartest survivalist characters in the series, probably my favorite character if you had to ask me, he's really doing a lot of dumb things this season, making a lot of dumb decisions, and he keeps screwing up over and over again because he seems to be underestimating his opponents or not really getting a good read on people, which is something that he hasn't done throughout the series. I mean, it's something that is seems out of character for him. And yet again, it's that whole rushed character writing thing that's really taking its toll in these two episodes, these two most recent ones. In this episode, he goes to Daenerys and he tells her that if the bells ring, the tower bells ring, that means they've surrendered, so you can just stop the attack. It's over. You do not need to, you know, destroy the city. It's very interesting how there's a callback to, I believe, last season when they're talking to Lady Olenna, and Lady Olenna says, "You're going to have to rule them through fear." And Danny says, "I don't want to be the Queen of Ashes." And she literally does the complete opposite in this episode. The battle ensues. This episode is mostly battle filled. It's not entirely battle, but we get that beginning stuff with Tyrion, Jon, and Daenerys, and we get all of that stuff leading into this battle. And I still question a lot of the military strategy that is going on this season. Some of it doesn't make any sense from some logistical standpoint or logical standpoint. Specifically in this episode, their plan was to just to combat these scorpions and these flying arrows and these giant things. One that they already know can kill and penetrate dragon skin. They saw it in the last episode. Their way to combat that was literally fly right at them and attack them. And not only attack one of them, two of them, but all of them with one dragon, no other ships backing up the dragon to kind of give some type of distracting cover fire or anything like that. They just Danny just decided to fly right at them and start burning and blowing up ships, and then take the ones out on the shore as well. And it worked. Don't know quite how it worked. I mean, they were all waiting for this to happen. They all should have been ready to fire. And the problem I had with them is like they would fire all of their bolts and then reload. That's not quite what you do in that situation. You fire some and then you fire others, and while those others are firing, you reload the others and you go in sequence. That's kind of the best way to do it. That's the way they would do with archers in medieval battles. Is that's the way you do it, so you're not stuck, with your pants down while you're reloading. I mean, that's what they used to do with musket battles in the Revolutionary War as well. The people in front would fire, and then while they're reloading, the people behind them would fire. I mean, like that's how it works. But in this episode, no, that wasn't really what they did. And then the Golden Company was pretty useless, really, really disappointing, because they kind of were supposed to be 20,000 strong, and 20,000 is a lot of people. For comparison's sake, I mean, there were 10,000 orcs at the Battle of Helm's Deep in the movie The Two Towers, the Lord of the Rings movie. There was double that when it came to the Golden Company, and I don't know how much Danny had left and Jon had left from the giant battle at Winterfell that they just had, but apparently they had enough to believe they could fight them at one on one. But I guess their strategy worked where the dragon burst through behind them, and I'm thinking to myself, dragons aren't quiet. You know what I mean? If that dragon was coming from behind them, they didn't hear any ruckus, anything happening or anything like that. I guess not. And then the Golden Company was pretty much destroyed. And then Jon and his Dothraki and Unsullied, entered the city, entered King's Landing. Apparently there are Dothraki left, And I was led to believe with the Battle of Winterfell that all of the Dothraki died. That's what it kind of looked like, or at least like 90 or 80% of them died. I don't know what the heck was going on there, but hey, we'll just throw them in there and let's see what's going on. So they make their way through the city, and Dany's just burning the heck out of initially soldiers. She's just attacking soldiers with Drogon. She's just going after them, and you see Qyburn go up to Cersei and say, the walls have been breached. She's like, "Oh, the Golden Company will save us." He's like, "If they're gone, the fleet will save us." The Scorpions, nope, they're gone. And she's like, "I guess the soldiers will fight to the end for me." Okay, they kind of did, and then they got beaten, and she had to like move, and she had to now leave the keep, which she said was the safest place in all of King's Landing. Not really, not when a dragon is flying in and is about to literally rain down hellfire on you. And that's kind of what happened for a good part of this episode. Basically, the second half of this episode was all out chaos, just unbelievable chaos. Um, basically, Cersei gave up, she relinquished, and the bells started ringing, and everybody stopped because the bells signal defeat, they signal surrender, and it is over. Meanwhile, there were people running through the streets throughout all of this chaos and all of the fighting and all this, just peasants, you know common people, and they were just caught up in the middle. And I'll say this, the one thing that this episode definitely shows is the people who typically get caught in the middle and the people who are typically affected the most when it comes to this level of warfare, whether it be medieval warfare or even modern warfare to a certain extent, are innocent bystanders, collateral damage, just regular non-military people who are just there living. And what we saw in this episode is they paid the ultimate price in dying, because Daenerys just in that moment snaps, all of the weight of all of the things that she's been through, and I guess all of the things that she's been through most recently, just finally got her to snap, and she's going to, go, for the lack of a better term, go crazy, just become the mad queen like her father became the mad king. And the interesting kind of historical aspect of it is the Mad King was going to basically blow up King's Landing. That was essentially what he was going to do. And Jaime Lannister was the one who stopped him from doing that. He's the one who killed him and became the Kingslayer. And it's a negative name that he had throughout his whole life. And it's one that was probably should have been reevaluated or retold as a heroic story, because it kind of was. Jaime saved all the people of King's Landing. Which is interesting in this episode is that he tries to get through the lines to get to Cersei, and he's caught. He's caught by Daenerys's army. He's imprisoned, and he and Tyrion have an amazing scene together. Um, Peter Dinklage, I think, is an amazing actor. He acted his ass off throughout this entire series, and I think the actor who plays Jaime, as well. He has had so much to work with when it comes to uh, plot and character stuff on Nicholas Coster-Waldau, and it's frustrating for a lot of people to see how his character ended and to see what his character ended up doing in his final acts of being alive. He also died in this episode as well. It is regressive for his character. It does have a poetic kind of full circle character arc to it. Granted, that's not much of an arc. It's more of a circle. If we're getting my geometric shapes correctly, and it's problematic for a lot of people because it undoes a lot of what we saw from Jaime throughout the series, specifically what he went through at the end of last season, where he severed his ties with Cersei. He, pretty much left her because he didn't like what she was doing, didn't like what she became. He didn't like that she was just abandoning the other people of the kingdom for petty reasons to hold her power. And now he all of a sudden reverts that very quickly. and almost too quickly. And that's another problem with this episode and with the last episode and what's becoming apparent with the season right now. Not specifically the first three episodes, but these last two is, like I said last week, the writing is very truncated. It's very quick. It's very convenient. It's very contrived. They're pushing things forward that they would typically take a few episodes to build to really convince us the legitimacy of some of these actions of these characters. And they just don't have the time to do it. They just really don't. And what we're seeing is the result of that being things that are sticking out that we shouldn't be, that we don't want to see, or things that are sticking out that feel fake, they feel false, they feel out of character because they're so abrupt. And that happens in this episode with Jamie and with Jamie, who, he gets freed by Tyrion. They have a wonderful last moment between brothers, and Tyrion basically tells him what we've kind of known all along, the reason why they're so connected, the reason why Tyrion has constantly vouched for him or constantly gone to him for guidance and for safety, is that Jamie was the only one who never treated him like a monster throughout his whole life. Uh, Tyrion was treated very poorly because he's a dwarf. If he was not born into royalty, he probably would be dead by now. You know what I mean? That's just kind of the facts of the world of Game of Thrones, where it's a very harsh world for people who aren't royalty, or people who aren't well off financially, or to be honest, for people who are women or people of color. They're not treated very well in this series or in this world. And what is very interesting is you have this character of Peter Dinklage who's overcome so much, but now they've written his character to make so many mistakes, like I mentioned before. That's a big problem. He tells Jamie that there's a way to escape the keep. You go down to the catacombs. There's a way out to the shoreline. There'll be a boat waiting there for you, and you can essentially leave through there, and you can take Cersei and just go to Pentos. You can make it to Pentos, which is, of course, right across the narrow sea in Essos, and you can just live, under secret forever or whatever. So he does that, but on his way to doing that, he comes across Euron Greyjoy, who is honestly one of the most throwaway characters in all of Game of Thrones. He's just a a douchebag, bravado, asshole guy. I don't like his character. I just really don't. He doesn't have really any character development or anything like that. He doesn't even get to he doesn't even get to be taken out by the person I think who should have taken him out, which should have been Yara. Yara should have come with her fleet. They should have had maybe this big battle, but I thought he was dead when Danny blew up his ship with the Dragonfire. But of course, due to just really convenient and just kind of lazy writing, oh, he's still alive. And I'm like, he doesn't need to be alive. This confrontation right here doesn't need to happen between Jamie and Euron. They don't have a history together. They don't have a rivalry together. There's nothing there to have this happen other than the writers and Benioff and Weiss wanted it to happen, and that really did bother me. So I can understand kind of the negative aspects that people have with that. But during the fight with Euron, he stabs him, but Jamie makes his way to Cersei, and they end up reuniting. They end up reuniting because the Hound and Arya show up to King's Landing. Excuse me. And they get in, and basically the Hound and his brother Sir Gregor, the Mountain, are gonna have their fight. The Clegane Bowl finally happened, and it was awesome. It was everything I kind of wished it would be. It was, back and forth. It was brutal. It was just gorgeously well done. The way it was shot, just aesthetically amazing. Just amongst the carnage and the falling debris and the fire, they're just these two titans are battling it out to the end, and it literally came to that, to the absolute end, where Sir Gregor pretty much sacrificed himself to finally kill his brother, someone who tormented them when they were children and tormented him his whole life, and he's finally got his retribution that he's been waiting for his whole life, and that was really great to see. But before that happened, Qyburn gets killed by Sir Gregor, kind of just thrown. It was awesome. His head cracks. I'm like, good, that guy's finally dead. And then Cersei just kind of goes by him. They reunite. But before that even happens, there's a great, amazing scene between Arya and the Hound, where basically the Hound tells her, Don't go any further. Go home. Go away. Don't become me. Don't don't let your life go down this path because there's only one way it ends, and that's basically death. The path you go down for revenge. There's that whole thing. Where if you go down the path of revenge, dig two graves because one for the person you're trying to get revenge on, and one for yourself because it just it's self-sacrificial many times for in many situations, I should say. And Arya listens to him and decides to go away, and she ends up making her way through the city with just all of this freaking chaos happening. And she tries to survive. She tries to save some people. She gets trampled at some point by crowds of people, and she's just trying to survive. And the way it's shot is so well done. It's a kind of a close-up shot of really just her in the frame itself, her in the entire frame. And it's just like there's just explosions around her, people falling, people running, dirt, debris, fire. It's just the cinematography in this episode overall was incredible, and it just immerses you into the chaos, into the world. She ends up getting pretty messed up, and she ends up you know, getting nearly blasted by fire a few times. She gets, rocks fell on her. She gets a really bloody, really not mangled, but she's bleeding pretty profusely. She may want to have that looked at some point. But she ends up finally awaking at the end of this episode to a white horse who is seemingly survived all of this chaos and all the massacring and all that kind of stuff. And she gets on it, and there's like a calm in the battle, and just amongst the rubble and the bodies, she just gets on it. And where she's going, I think, is can be left up to speculation. I think she is possibly going to kill Daenerys, or perhaps not. Not really sure at this point in the series. Um, all the Many of the guessing has been wrong so far when it comes to all kinds of theories about character stuff and all that. Some people think that Bran is the one controlling that horse. Uh, I don't know. I maybe I've given up a little bit when it comes to them really delving into what Bran truly is anymore. I don't know if we're going to even go back to Winterfell in the next episode, perhaps in an epilogue type manner. I'm not sure. Maybe it is a little bit more. The previews for next week did show us some snow. And I don't know if there's snow in the south yet, but there's definitely snow up north. So we'll see what's going to happen. Um, Cersei and Jamie die together. They are under the catacombs, and the way for them to escape is blocked because of all of the rubble. And that's how they die. And it's like I said, it definitely comes full circle for both Jamie and her. This idea that they are eternally connected to one another, and they ultimately die together. And it's kind of nice from a poetic standpoint, but it's also kind of like, man, I kind of wanted something else. I wanted a little bit more. I wanted something different. I wanted something with more meat on it. I wanted something else. And I understand the argument for a lot of people on the internet, on Twitter, Facebook, wherever that wanted more. I'm with you. I don't necessarily hate it, but I kind of wanted more specifically for the Jamie character. I wanted to see something more. I mean, he was already fully redeemed, and then he made this regressive move backwards, which I think left a lot of people with a bad feeling about the whole situation. I kind of wanted more from Cersei this season. We didn't get much from Cersei, and Lena Headey is an amazing actress who has given us a fantastic career performance for the character of Cersei Lannister. And I wanted to see her do more in this season, and we only really saw her do very little. We saw her do some stuff in the first episode. We saw her do some stuff in the fourth episode, and now this episode where she kind of just stood around on a balcony and looked off into the distance as things were burning. She didn't have much to do. She had a great exchange there with Jamie, but that was about it. So that's the end of their characters. Not necessarily the end I thought they were going to get, or the end I think a lot of people thought they were going to get, but that's what happened. What is also very interesting about this episode is John's reaction to what was happening during the battle. What happened when they finally gave up and when Danny pretty much pressed on the attack and just started murdering innocent people. His reaction was revulsion, shock, surprise, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, man, you've got to be a little bit more aware of who the person is that you're dealing with. Daenerys is someone who has kind of played both sides when it comes to morality. I think she's shown both good side of morality, bad side, and she definitely mostly revolved in the gray area throughout the series. And it's interesting the argument people are having, or even just the discussions people are having, is was her turn, evil, if you will. I use evil in quotes because I'm not sure if she's purely evil or if she's just someone who is determined to literally get what she wants. And her turn evil is it's not something I think that comes out of nowhere. There are little things planted throughout the series which shows her convictions when it comes to being able to do cruel acts. She has, literally killed, executed people before. If you remember Marine, she had all those people, those slavers crucified, all those, you know what I mean? She's capable of that, but it's typically behind some act of justice, or there's typically a reason for it that is somewhat justified. I'm losing that term. I'm using that term very loosely, but sometimes her actions are justified and backed up for legitimate reasons. The problem, I'm coming back to this again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, is with the season being so short, you weren't able to organically develop her reasons why for this character turn as much as you would have in the past, or as much as I think was necessary to make it believable or to make it organic enough to be like, man, I knew she was gonna snap. It was just about the time. I could see it coming a mile away. You know what I mean? For some people, they did see it. For some people, they didn't. But ultimately, I think is it's not something that was out of the realm of possibilities. You know what I mean? The Targaryens do have this sense of leading with emotions. She has had a history of leading with emotions, and she definitely did that here. Granted, I personally wouldn't have done it. If I'm going to take over a kingdom or a place, I don't want to necessarily destroy it because it's going to be up to me to rebuild it when I do take over. It's kind of a bad strategy informed from her, but I don't think she was in her right mind. And there's also a lot of people who are making legitimate arguments that they don't like the idea that she became this crazy woman, like, oh, she's too emotionally un there's this stereotype where women are emotionally unfit for leadership roles or things like that, like they get too emotional to the point where they wouldn't be good in this role. And and people are taking it that direction, and I could understand that perspective. If you can make that argument and make it convincingly, then do so if you will. I'm not quite sure that that was the intention of Benioff and Weiss, was to make it seem like, oh, there she is. She's just some crazy woman who lost a couple of her children, and now she's gone crazy because of it. Look out. I don't think that that was their intention. I could be wrong. I don't know them personally. Would be cool if I did, though, because they're famous, people, and that'd be kind of cool. But yeah, so a lot of things happen in this episode. But going back to John, he he now has he now has a difficult decision to make. I don't know if he can necessarily support this queen anymore. Like he said during this episode, that she is his queen. She loves him, or he loves her. She loves him, and I don't know if he can support her anymore, and I don't know what this means going forward. I don't know if this means that excuse me, I don't know if this means that he's going to take the throne for himself. I don't know who would back him if he tried. I mean, he has the North. He definitely has the Vale. He could probably get the Riverlands. Um, Are there any Lannisters left? Any Lannister cousins left at Casterly Rock that would want to throw support behind him? Um, we all, and I think Highgarden's pretty much gone. Dorne would back Daenerys. Dorne has always backed the Targaryens. They backed the Targaryens during the during Robert's Rebellion, if my history leads me correctly in that. So yeah, so I'm not sure what type of civil war is going to brew up for next week. I also don't think they have enough time to really stage a large coup slash civil war type thing. If they had the traditional 10 episodes, then perhaps they could, but they don't. They've got one episode left that I think is an hour and a half long or so. I could be wrong on that, so please correct me if I am. But all we have left is one episode. So we'll definitely see. I don't hate the episode. I think it's a good episode from a lot of perspectives. I think it's a good episode when it comes to the filmmaking. I think is still on another completely different level than anything else we've seen in television history so far. The acting is really good, but some of that writing is just questionable because of the time constraints and because they're going down certain avenues that aren't that particularly good or believable. So, anywho, it's an overall, I think, good episode. I don't hate it. I'm kind of soft when it comes to a lot of these things. I try to be as objective as I can be. But hey, if you like this episode, good for you. If you hated it, yep, good for you as well. But anywho, so this has been my review of the Game of Thrones season 8, episode 5, titled The Bells, which is a very appropriate title. But if you like this video, please check out the other videos I do on my channel, and we only have one episode left, so let's see how it all turns out. So until next time, bye.